presented by Sonic Boom. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and as always, I'm joined by WEEI's John Lyons Patriots with a scintillating 24-21 come-from-behind win over the Philadelphia Eagles in what I can only describe, John Lyons, as a game for the ages.
Yeah, less entertaining than the joint practices they had this week for sure. This was an interesting game in that really classic tale of two halves. I thought the Patriots played really poorly in the first half of this game, outside of the 69-yard touchdown catch and run by Kyle Williams. I thought they played really poorly in the first half. Much better in the second half, as you mentioned. A game for the ages here on August 22nd of 2026. But again, like it's one of those things that we'll get into it because a game like this, it's what's their depth look like? And I think you saw in some parts it's okay, in some parts it's not, but at least we got a Kyle Williams long touchdown catch. That was fun.
It was fun, the 69-yarder for Kyle Williams, and of course, late in the game, Baron Morton hitting Nick DeGennaro on a 37-yard touchdown pass to win the game. Let's start with the offense because I think, first of all, before we even start with the offense, I do want to say, were you surprised that they didn't play the starters at all? And as a follow-up to that, could we potentially see them Thursday night in Cleveland?
I'm going to say no to both. And the reason I say no is the intensity of the joint practices this week. I don't think you needed to play the starters in the preseason games. Like the amount of reps, just say A.J. Brown got against Quinion Mitchell or the interior of the offensive line got against Jalen Carter. Like you didn't really need to play those guys in this game. Even Carlton Davis got enough reps for a veteran, I thought, this week. So, and then next Thursday, I'd say no, because look, Cleveland, it's hard to predict what they're going to look like. We know there's talent on that defense. The offense is all over the place. That's going to be an unpredictable environment. And because they opened the season on a Wednesday night, that's less than 2 weeks from their opener. I don't want to play any of the starters in that Cleveland game. So I wasn't surprised they didn't play tonight, and I wouldn't play them against Cleveland either.
Yeah, I thought they might play tonight. I thought that at the very least we might see some of the starters for a couple of series before they pulled them. I was surprised that they didn't play. And I understand that the joint practices went well and you had two of them. So you got everything you needed to get in. You saw everything you needed to see. But this goes back to the ongoing conversation that we're having now about what is the point of playing these preseason games, John? Because at the end of the day, if you're not going to play your starters and get them some in-game work, then there's no point in doing this anymore. At some point, forget about expanding to 18 games during the regular season. I don't think the NFL can wait. I think you got to get rid of one of these preseason games. And I know the owners aren't necessarily going to be on board with that because they don't want to lose the gate. But this is getting now to the point where it's borderline pointless because, again, fans pay to see Drake May. They pay to see Christian Gonzalez. They pay to see these guys. No offense to Kobe Minor, no offense to Baron Morton, but they're not shelling out $110 a ticket to this game tonight to see those guys play. Even though they know those guys are going to play in the game, they're not paying to see those guys. And again, I understand from an operational standpoint, Vrabel, the staff, they can't make decisions based on what the fans want. But I thought at the very least, you give Drake May a couple of series, you give the starting offense a couple of series, you give most of the defense. I knew Christian Gonzalez wasn't going to play, but you give the starting D a couple of series, see what they can do, let them work out the kinks. Because, again, we both have coached. There's a big difference between practice and a game day environment. As well as those two joint practices when I just feel not getting a little bit of that game experience to knock the rust off is an issue for me.
Yeah, John, you and I have talked about this before, and I feel pretty strongly about if the NFL really cared about player safety and the quality of the product, there'd be 16 regular season games with 2 bye weeks in there. And then that would enhance the importance of the preseason, and you'd see more of those guys play. And I think what you're at with the preseason now is there's really 2 benefits to it. One, it helps the depth of your roster, and it helps sharpen the coaching staff. But to your point, I don't think you need 3 preseason games to do that. I think 2 is enough to do that, especially with all the joint practices they have. I just think, unfortunately, the trade-off is going to be whenever it comes, they'll have 2 preseason games 18 regular season games and try to spoon feed us some BS about, well, it's still 20 games either way, which is not a real thing. But I just think 3 is probably too much, even though there is some good to take out of them. It's just they're not going to give up the game and the money they get for it, to your point.
I got you. We had a little bit of a technical snafu there.
I got your back.
All right. The floor is yours, Senator.
Yeah, so as I was saying, 16 regular season games with 2 bye weeks would be the ideal scenario if the owners cared about player safety and the quality of the product, and the league did. But since they don't, we have 17 with 3 preseason games, and I think the only way to solve it is they're not going to get 16. It's going to end up 18 and 2, but I think 2 preseason games is more than enough. And I think
some technical difference. I think we're good now. We just had a press blue versus press red connection issue here. Again, hopefully the last of our snafus, the floor is yours.
No, so I just as I like for the third time here, 16 regular season games is more than enough, right? Like 16 and 2 bye weeks is really what you want. 17, I've always hated. They're going to go to 18 with the 2 preseason games eventually. But I think what the Patriots accomplished over the last 2 weeks, like the game coming up against Cleveland, I think is really unnecessary. Like you've kind of got everything you needed to get from joint practices, from game operation, especially if you're not going to play the guys against Cleveland. I just don't think there's a need for the travel for the 3rd preseason game. I think you should just have 1 home, 1 away preseason game, get the operation.
I said that to someone earlier tonight. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's all you honest. But like you said, John, and you're right. I mean, you can only charge $12 for a cheeseburger so many times a year, and they're not going to give up that preseason game to do it.
No, and I think the only way the owners do it is if they get that 18th regular season game, and then they'll give the players the 2 buys, they'll give them the pay bump, and they'll get rid of one of these preseason games. But again, there's no point, like you said. Now you're gonna have a short week. You got to get on a plane. You got to fly to Cleveland. You got to play on a Thursday night after playing on a Saturday night. So to your point, you're definitely not going to see the starters on Thursday night. So what is the point of this 3rd preseason game now? It's literally a waste of time. And I think, look, I understand. I get it. The owners want to make money, but at some point you've got to look at this pragmatically and say, all right, what's best for the product? What's best for the league? If you really genuinely want that extra regular season game, you've got to start having that conversation now if you're the owners about getting rid of this 3rd preseason game. Because again, like I said, you play 1 at home, 1 away, bang, you're done. And I think you bring up a great point, player safety. If you really cared about player safety as much as you claim you care about it, then guess what you do? You get rid of the 3rd preseason game now. You give these guys 2 weeks before the season opener to really heal, because camp is tough, man. You're talking about these guys have been going at it now for almost a month. Even with camp now reformatted and gone are the triple sessions, it's still hard on the body. So you give these guys a couple weeks before the opener to heal up, to get ready. It will help the product. But again, the owners are never going to do it, because here's the thing. You're not playing your starters. You're playing your 3rd and your 4th string guys. People are paying for it. They're making money, so they don't care. Defensively, you mentioned that it was a tale of 2 halves, and it's so true, because defensively in the first half, I thought they were terrible. Terrible pursuit angles, missed tackles, bad run fits, you name it. They did it all, and they did things that they shouldn't have done. Second half was a little better, but talk about the defense and what you saw from them.
Yeah, I would largely agree with you. I thought in the first half, run defense was brutal. A lot of missed tackles, a lot of open lanes, too. A lot of guys getting 4 or 5 yards before any sort of contact. We saw Gabe Akis with the roughing the passer penalty, which 2 full steps and then launching into the guy. Like, you got to know better than that if you're going to play in the NFL. I thought, on the whole, in the first half, like Kindle Vindor, probably the only guy.
Best defensive player tonight, I thought.
And I would say in the first half, he's the only guy that I thought start to finish, had a good half. Second half, I do think they were a lot better, but I also think this speaks to something you and I talked about in our offseason shows. As silly as it is to say with a team that just went to the Super Bowl, they're not done with their rebuild yet. And they still are working on that depth, especially defensively, their defensive depth. And it's just not there yet. Like you saw when it was the Eagles' second string against the Patriots' second string, the Eagles had a clear advantage. Now, in the joint practices, when it was ones on ones, I thought the Patriots were as good, if not better, both days, pretty much everywhere. But when it was twos on twos, the Eagles had a real advantage. Now, when you got into the second half and it was threes and fours, things kind of evened out a little. The Patriots are much better. But I think this was just another little clue into yes, they've come a long way in 2 years. Yes, they are a Super Bowl contender, but they are thin on defense, and it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and it showed up tonight. As far as the stats go, just going back and forth here now. Tommy DeVito, 18 of 15, 151 yards. He had a touchdown passer rating of 110.7. I mean, look, I think some of the things we saw
What a
last
fake
week.
stat that is. How about that?
I know. And he had the long run of 46 yards, but I think some of the things we saw last week popped up again tonight.
Yeah.
Late on some throws, over processing, needs to speed up his clock. He's putting the ball down a little too soon and taking off. And yes, he had the big run. And again, look, I think you made a profound statement about Tommy DeVito and where he's at in regards to the Patriots. If you need him to play for 2 games, you could be okay with him because McDaniels could cater the game plan to his skill set and they could get by. If you need him to play 4 or more games, you could be in trouble. And I think, again, we saw a lot of what we saw last week tonight. He had a couple of really good moments, the long run. He had a couple of passes where the timing and the anticipation were good. Then he also missed guys, and he held on to the ball too long. So, once again, there was some good and some bad with DeVito.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it tonight, too, tied into the offensive line. You didn't have Ben Brown. Marcus Bryant got injured early. Like, that's going to be a real test of their depth.
You're getting
those
thin
guys
all of a sudden up front.
Especially in the interior up front. And you saw, and by the way, I don't have numbers to back this up. I felt like the 2 teams tonight blitzed and brought creative pressure more than I've seen in a preseason game in a long time. Like they
I
were
think
doing
the
all
Patriots are. The Patriots, I think, are going to be a heavy blitz team this year.
Yeah,
they
I
were.
think they're gonna have
They
to be.
were a heavier blitz team than we think last year.
Yeah, and I think they're going to have to be with how thin they are at edge. I mean, you can't just rely on the 2 defensive
Right.
tackles for pressure, as great as they are. You just can't. But
Right.
yeah, it was interesting. I think some of it was tied to the O-line and that they gave up a lot of quick pressure, but it was just another night of the Tommy DeVito experience. Great throw to Kyle Williams on the touchdown. Great 36-yard run. Multiple other plays where he's tucking the ball to run when he's not fully under pressure yet, or he's behind on throws, or he's late on throws. So that's, again, you can hide him for lack of a better term for a couple games if he's got to play. You can't hide him for 6 games. And I think we're seeing that, right? Like that's what we saw last week. That's what we saw in joint practices. That's what we saw tonight as well. And again, just in fairness to him, I thought the offensive line in the first half had a really bad half, and that tied into it as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And let's talk about that. You mentioned that Marcus Bryant got hurt, ankle injury. We don't have an update on that, but it could be significant, especially in light of the fact that they lost Ben Brown last week. Caleb Lomu gets the start at left tackle. I know that raised a lot of eyebrows around here. And to that, I would say they're cross-training him. He's not exclusively going to play right tackle. He's going to be trained how to play right tackle, left tackle, and I think eventually you're going to see him kick inside and play some guard as well. Demetrius Crownover got a lot of reps at right tackle. He played a lot of left tackle last week, played right tackle after Marcus Bryant went down. What did you see from the 2 young tackles tonight, specifically Caleb Lomu?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of an up and down night for him. Like there was a couple times where the Eagles would run stunts and it looked like I don't know if he just wasn't on the same page with the guys on the interior or he didn't quite see it, but he got turned around. He gave up a couple pressures, but then he had good reps where he held his ground and he actually had some pretty good run blocking reps as well. But just a lot of inconsistencies there. And look, it's a guy that they picked as a developmental offensive lineman. I don't expect him to come in and be really good right away. And I think we saw it last week. You go back to last week, he gave up that pressure on a 3rd and 6 on the first drive. And then other than that was really good early on. Like you saw kind of like that again today. He had a lot more reps. So I think you saw more bad plays, but you also saw his share of good plays as well. To me, if Will Campbell gets hurt week 1 in the second series, right now I'm leaning Marcus Bryant's going to come in to take that spot, at least early on in the season. Could Lomu develop by the end of the year to that guy? I think he could. It just, you still, like you saw our joint practice, you saw it tonight, he's still got some work to do there.
Yeah, I think he can play left tackle. He played left tackle at Utah. I think he can play left tackle in the NFL. I don't think he's ever going to be a dominant run blocker. I think at best he's a good run blocker, but I don't think he'll ever be great in that area of his game because as athletic and lean as he is, I don't think he's a natural bender. He's not a guy that can get underneath guys, root them out, and get movement. That's not who he is. Now, I do think he'll be better in your lateral running game, outside zone, inside zone. That's where I think he can excel. I don't think he's going to necessarily be as effective on drive blocks, where it's to block a guy one-on-one, inside or outside drive block, and get him out of there. He's not going to get a ton of movement on duo blocks to your inside backer. So I don't think he's ever going to be an elite level run blocker. I do think, however, the athleticism and the skill set are there for him to be an elite level pass blocker. And you see flashes of it. You saw it tonight. He does a really good job of staying square, maintaining his punch, communicating on those TE stunts, and exchanging. He does a really nice job on that. But then there are times, as you said, John, where he also gets caught leaning forward and he gets beat. And there are times where he's a little light in the ass and he can't anchor and guys can bull and rip him. So he's got a lot of work to do. As you said, if he has to play for you this year, or if he has to play a lot of snaps for you this year, it could be a problem. You hope he doesn't. Again, you hope this Bryant injury is not serious. But I do think at the end of the day, he has a lot of upside. And down the road, and I hate rehashing the whole Will Campbell left tackle conversation, but if you needed to play Caleb Lomu at left tackle, I do think he can develop to a point where he can play left tackle and be consistent there because, after all, he is longer, especially in terms of arm length, than Will Campbell. Now, as far as Crownover is concerned, I thought he played better last week than he did this week. He's another guy. You're talking about a guy that's 6'8". He's not a natural bender either. He's big, he's athletic, but he's another guy that struggles to bend and get underneath guys. Thought he did all right in pass pro, had a couple of breakdowns. Okay as a run blocker, but here's the thing. At the end of the day, these reps are valuable for these guys, and that's what matters more than anything else. It's not necessarily about grading out each rep and saying they did this on this snap and that snap. It's more about them getting the experience.
And I wonder, and I agree with you on the cross-train point. I wonder if once you get to the regular season, they'd be better off just saying, Marcus Bryant, you're our backup left tackle. Lomu, you're our backup right tackle, and focus on that just for the regular season.
Yeah.
From a game plan perspective, I think that would be valuable because I think Bryant has a little more experience doing that. Lomu, they clearly want to be, I think, the long-term right tackle. If their plan works out, they want Campbell on the left, Lomu on the right. So I'm okay with them cross-training him now. I would kind of lean towards in the regular season, kind of sticking them to one side. It just kind of when that comes around. But yeah, to your point, like Lomu played almost a full game tonight. Like that's valuable in itself, just to get the reps in there. Crownover played almost a full game. Land Larison played a ton of snaps in this game. Jam Miller played a lot of snaps. Like that stuff is valuable because they're going to need one of those guys to probably be the third running back. So it's valuable that those guys played those snaps. We'll see. I mean, Jermichael Hasty was in there as well, but I don't know. And Hassan Haskins, I think there's real potential there. He's just a late arrival. So I know he's got experience with Vrabel from Tennessee, doesn't really have experience with McDaniels. But yeah, that's where some of the value of tonight goes, where those guys get real game reps and a lot of game reps. And then we can maybe see Thursday if one of those guys separates themselves too.
Yeah, Thursday I think is going to be huge for Land Larison. I thought he looked pretty good tonight. I think he gives you a little bit something different in terms of what he can do as a runner and as a receiver. And I know it gets a little cumbersome to continue to compare him to Rex Burkhead, but you see a lot of Rex Burkhead
Yeah.
there beyond the number 34. But I liked what I saw from him at times, especially when he ran the football inside the tackles. I thought he did a really good job of maintaining his balance, his feet, and pushing the pile. We didn't see a lot of Jam Miller. He got the start last week against the Colts. We saw him late in this one. Again, I like what I see from him. He is a meat and potatoes back. He's not flashy. He's not a guy that's going to stick his foot in the ground in space and swivel his hips and make a guy miss. He's a guy that's a one-cut runner. He gets vertical. He stays vertical, and he can get you positive yards, 4 or 5 yards a carry. I like what I've seen from him. I still think he's the favorite to be your third running back right now.
Yeah, I lean towards agreeing, and I think it's his physicality. And you look at the makeup of their room, not that Henderson can't be physical, but you go back to last year, he had the 55-yard run, the 69-yard run. He also had a lot of runs of 3 or fewer yards where he was struggling, especially inside. Now,
Which was
I
kind
think
of the knock on him at Ohio State
yeah,
coming
and
into
I think
last
he
year's draft as well.
And I think he can improve on that. And I think Stevenson is a good short yardage back, but as he's shown, if he gets overused, the fumbling problems start to come up. So I think if you can have a guy that's really physical, even just in short yardage situations that you can lean on besides those two guys, and I think of the group, Jam Miller, to me, he's been the best one so far in camp. Just again, between the tackles, gain 3 to 4 yards when you really need it. I trust him more than probably the other just because of his physicality to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about Jam Miller is he didn't pick up a lot of carries at Alabama. There's not a lot of wear and tear on that
Yeah.
body. So he's going to be able to give you more carries here because he was in a timeshare in Alabama. He was never the guy per se, but he didn't come into the league beat up, where a lot of these backs come into the league with a lot of carries on their bodies, and a lot of them have to be the man right out of the gate. They're the starting running back on a team. He played a lot of football at Alabama, got a lot of carries, but he didn't have to be the man. And I think that certainly helps him in terms of freshness and making the most of his carries. Going back to the defense, you mentioned Gabe Bacchus. I know a lot of people were not happy with his performance last week, specifically Coach Mike Vrabel. I thought you and I were a little bit more realistic about the way he played last week. You mentioned that he had the roughing the passer against the Red Rifle in the first half, but what else did you see from Gabe Bacchus tonight? And how would you compare and assess his performance from last week to this week?
By the way, Andy Dalton might be the smartest guy in the NFL. You
Oh,
sign
yeah.
up to be a backup in Philly. Jalen Hurts is on a little bit of thin ice. You can step in to a really talented roster
Yeah.
right around you that can contend for a deep playoff run. So shout out to Andy Dalton.
And by the
Smart
way,
guy.
him and Kirk Cousins have made a lot of money in this league. They made a lot of
Yeah.
money in this league because they positioned themselves to where they started for a long time, then they became a backup. But to your point, he could start at any point. So
Yeah.
shout out to him and his agent. And same thing
Yeah.
with Kirk
Hey,
Cousins in Vegas.
following in the footsteps of Matt Flynn and Russell Wilson, right? So good for them. But like, I would say Gabe Bacchus to me, it was similar to last week, where last week, those first 3, 4 reps, he felt a little out of control. Then he had the good pass rush that helped set up the interception. Next play, set the edge on the run really well. Tonight, I thought it was like, look, he was going against Bell, who's what, 6'9" at some point. Like, it's
He's
tough
huge.
to you're not going to bull rush that guy often.
No.
We saw him try one time, he got thrown to the ground on it, but we saw again, he had some flashes. There was a couple times he over pursued. There was a couple other times though he got pressure. Like I think you can see the athletic ability there. You see the NFL talent there. So I would rate it very similar to last week, maybe a little bit more of a sample size tonight. But that's a guy that you can really see that if he can figure it out, and what I mean by figure it out is understand the scheme, but also play at the right speed consistently, that dude could approach double-digit sacks in the NFL. Like, you can see the talent there, you see the instincts there. It's just he's gotta put it all together, and some of this inconsistency last week and tonight, the guy's been an NFL player for like 3 weeks. I mean, he didn't sign his deal to a few weeks ago, didn't start practicing. So he needs a lot more development and time. The question for the Patriots between August 22nd and September 9th, how much of that ground are they going to be able to make up with him?
Yeah, and to your point, and I think it's an interesting one. I said this last week where I feel when you look at him, he could consistently be an 8 to 10 sack a season guy, but I think his ceiling is beyond that. he could potentially be a 12 to 15 sacks a season type of player as well, because you see it in his get off. He has elite level get off, and he's a closer. He can get to the quarterback. He is not one of these guys that's flashy. He's going to win with speed to power. He's not a guy that's going to have an array of pass rush moves and he's going to beat offensive tackles that way. He's going to beat him with his get off, and if he's engaged, he plays with really good pad level, really good lean. That's where his wrestling background comes in, and he can power through guys. That's his game. Typically, those guys don't usually consistently get you 13, 14 sacks a season, but they're going to get off the bus every week and get you 8 to 10. I have him in that category for now, but you saw it tonight. He does have those elite pass rusher traits that if he continues to develop and he's coached up, he's a guy that could end up being a double-digit sack guy and be a guy that ends up getting a second contract here and consistently be that double-digit sack guy. Let's be honest, the Patriots have not had that around here on a consistent basis for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe since Chandler Jones, just as from a natural talent standpoint.
We're talking over 10 years ago now.
Yeah, I mean, you correct me if Trey Flowers, I guess, was a guy like that. That's true. He was not here long enough, only a few years, but like he was that caliber of guy. But yeah, I mean, he also what I liked about him at Illinois is several of his sacks. He had 11 last year. Several of them were second effort sacks, which look in the NFL.
Yeah, he doesn't give up on plays.
Right. In the NFL, you're not going to clean up on second effort sacks, but if you can get 2 or 3 sacks a year, 4 sacks a year on a second effort high motor stuff, and then you can get 6 or 7 or 8 just on your pure talent and speed, then before you know it, you're at 9, 10, 11 sacks and you're a huge contributor on the defense. Like to me, you can see it there. Honestly, it's the same thing I would say offensively about Kyle Williams. You can see the tools there. You can see the potential there. The question is he going to put it together? Kyle Williams couldn't put it all together last year, which is why he had like 4 huge catches, and other than that, didn't do much. Can he and can Gabe Akers, can they put it together this year? Because from a physical tools and talent standpoint, 2 of maybe the top 10 most talented guys on the team. It's just, can they put it together?
Yeah, you mentioned Williams, 2 catches for 74 yards. Of course, he had the 69-yard touchdown reception in the first half. Nick DeGennaro was their second leading receiver with 4 catches for 61 yards. I do want to come back to another guy that we mentioned at the start of the show, and that's Kindle Vildor, the veteran corner, who was, I thought, their best defensive player tonight. And again, I think you see his value here. He is the complete player, in my opinion, John, in that he can cover. You see a willingness to come up and support the run. He's not afraid to attack blockers. He's not afraid to finish plays as a run defender. There's a lot to like about him. I think this guy could be a really valuable piece for this football team in terms of their depth.
Yeah, and has a little bit of experience with Mike Vrabel briefly in Tennessee in 2023. Bounced around. This guy's 28 years old, which I didn't realize until recently. But yeah, I mean, veteran guy, and what they're looking for, they obviously have Gonzalez and Davis and Jones in the slot. Those guys are entrenched. But especially ever since they let Alex Austin go this offseason, a lot of openings for who their third and fourth corners are going to be. I've liked Charles Woods in camp. I've been impressed by him. And I think these 2 preseason games, Vildor has kind of separated himself to me as that next guy. He's got pretty good length. He really attacks the ball. They do have Karan Prunty as well, who I think has some promise. We'll see how many corners they really want to keep, though, at that point. But yeah, I thought he was.
Prunty's a guy that I could see ultimately being a practice squad guy because you like his athleticism, but he didn't play a lot of football in college.
And also, too, like you watch a lot of his Wake Forest stuff, like a ton of zone and off zone stuff. Like he could use a year on the practice squad playing just man coverage more, learning that more. But yeah, I thought Vildor was their best player in the first half, best player overall for the game defensively. Had those 2 really nice pass breakups late in the first half. So that's a nice that's like a sneaky battle. Who's going to be that third, fourth corner? And he's really, I think, pushing hard for one of those spots.
Yeah, I agree. And I like what I've seen from Charles Woods too. But if you had to make that decision today, they're going to have to make that decision a week from tomorrow. But if you had to make the decision today, I would keep Vildor over Woods. I just think his experience, He's played a lot of football the last 4 years.
Yeah.
He's played in Chicago, played in Tennessee, Philadelphia. He's been around. He's a guy that has experience being a sub corner. He can play nickel. He can play in dime. He can play in a quarter package. You can use him in a lot of different ways. And he's going to play on your special teams. He's going to be a core special teamer. So I think he proved enough tonight. And if he does more on Thursday, I think he's proven enough this preseason in the games that I think it warrants him making this football team. Who are some other guys that may have stuck out to you tonight, good and bad, that you think are going to get people's attention?
So, I mean, I don't want to say one guy. The interior of the offensive line is a big red flag to me. I mean, especially with no
Problem.
Ben Brown there, like the depth there. So it's not one specific guy, I guess, that would be standing out to me there. But that's something that, I just think if Ben Brown is out for even a small amount of time, I mean, I don't really like what they have there. I think
If you listen to what Vrabel said last weekend, it sounds like it could be a multi-week injury, John. I mean, we could be
yeah.
talking about him missing at least the first 6 games.
And I will say, and you and I were kind of critical of him around draft time. I thought Baron Morton has gotten a lot better over the past month. And I don't know if he'll ever be enough to be a really good backup quarterback, but he really has improved over the past month or so. And I'm not a big believer in Tommy DeVito anyway. But I think Morton's a guy that if they can practice squad him this year and really develop him, maybe he can become a long-term backup, which I was skeptical of when they drafted him. But I thought in the second half tonight he was good, and he operated the 2-minute offense at the end. I thought pretty well, hit the touchdown pass late. So he's made a lot of progress. Again, he's got a long way to go, but you see the progress there.
Yeah, Morton's numbers 13 of 17, 129 yards. And the touchdown pass, he had a passer rating of 117. Here's the thing, and I'm glad you brought him up because neither one of us liked that pick. Just because I thought there were guys that went either right before him or right around him in that same area of the draft that I think had more physical upside. That being said, there was a lot to like about Morton from an intangible standpoint. The resume at Texas Tech, the high school football resume playing in Texas, the leadership, 2-time captain, a guy that was loyal to Texas Tech. There's a lot to like there. He checks off a lot of those boxes. And I hate talking about quarterbacks like this, but he does have a certain type of moxie about him. He just, his body language, he's a guy that you could see guys rallying around. He's tough. He'll hang in there. He'll take one in the chops, yet he'll get to a third read and he'll get the ball out. He just does those little things that I think you're right could eventually, as he develops, put him in a position where he could be a good backup in this league, whether it's here or somewhere else. He's not going to wow you with the arm talent. The vertical accuracy, though, is pretty good. You saw it tonight on the game-winning touchdown pass, but he doesn't have plus arm talent. He doesn't have elite arm talent, but he has enough arm talent that with the intangibles, the leadership, the high IQ, he can develop into a nice backup quarterback.
Yeah, and I would say, and I don't know if there's any connection to this or not, but Mike Vrabel was a player when they drafted Matt Castle, a college backup, because they liked a lot of the traits and developed him into a really good backup. So
yeah, I think that's a great comp, to be honest with you. And
yeah,
this guy played a lot more football than Castle did.
Yeah, good point, right? So, I mean, I think they'd like, and again, I think just based off where, like when I was at camp in late July, based off what I saw, and then the joint practice this week and tonight, there's a noticeable step forward from him in comfort level as well as just operating the offense. Like I wouldn't be surprised if next year I still would like them to bring in a vet, but I wouldn't be surprised next year if they're rolling with him as the backup quarterback to Drake May, at least come OTAs in the start of training camp.
Yeah, and the two of them have established a really good relationship. It seems like they almost had a relationship before he got here. But they've established a really good relationship. And I think Morton knows what he is. And oftentimes in this league, it's good to have guys that understand that, hey, this is my role. When my number is called, I'm going to execute my role. I'm going to do what's expected of me to help the team win. I think he's the kind of guy that gets that because sometimes with backup quarterbacks, especially if they do get an opportunity and they play well. It does tend to go to their heads. They think a little highly of themselves. They think they're better than they really are, and then they end up flopping and not lasting in the league. This is a guy who I think understands his role, understands who he is, and I think if he's called upon, he'll do a good job. And I think the other thing that's important to point out too, John, this is a quarterback-friendly system from the standpoint of there's a lot of easy throws in this offense. As much as people talk about the modern West Coast offense being a quarterback-friendly offense, there's a lot of complicated throws in that system. In this offense, even though you got a lot of the post-snap pattern reading and pattern adjusting by the receivers, you also have a lot of easy throws. McDaniels makes the game easy. So for a quarterback like Baron Morton, who doesn't have plus arm talent, this is a great system for him to learn in because he's going to make certain throws that are easy, that are throws that McDaniels is going to keep it simple, and he's going to play to his strengths.
And I think also just from a quarterback development standpoint, McDaniel's record speaks for itself. And I thought Ashton Grant did a really good job last year as well with May and Dobbs. So I just think that's one of those things long term to kind of think about as a backup, especially too, not to go down this road fully. When they pay Gonzalez, when they pay May, when they pay Campbell, you got to have cheap guys at other positions. So having a really cheap backup quarterback like that is a really valuable thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Gonzalez, what are your thoughts on where we're at with this? Because at this point, it's not an injury. He's clearly sitting in. It's obvious.
Yeah,
I mean, can we confirm that at least in hyperbole that he's not hurt? He's just not participating.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the day where we don't have to talk about this anymore and the deal's done. But the way I look at it, if I was Gonzalez or his agent, no way in hell am I doing joint practices or a preseason game. Like it's way too risky. And I don't think he's going to sit out games this regular season. I think what'll happen is either they'll get a deal done before week 1, and if they don't, what you'll see is if he gets any sort of minor injury, he'll miss a game. If it's a moderate injury, he'll miss 2 games. He's going to be extra cautious with that stuff, and some of us might not like it, but I think from a future life business standpoint, that's what he's going to do. But yeah, I thought there was 0 chance he was going to be in any of the joint practices unless he had a deal done. He wasn't going to play in preseason games anyway. So, look, I would set the market for him. You and I have talked about this before, but I don't think it's going to drag into the regular season. I think they have a couple weeks to get this deal done, and if not, they're going to have to wait and revisit it next spring.
Yeah, and you can tell Vrabel's tired of talking about it. He's being asked about it every time he meets with the media. So you can tell by his response today in the pregame show that he's had enough of talking about it. Here's the thing. I gave him a little too much credit. And one of my strengths in this role, John, is that when I am wrong, I am more than willing to eat the shit sandwich. And I'm gonna take a big heaping bite out of it right now because I was wrong. I gave him way too much credit for being a team player a couple of weeks ago and saying, I knew this kid was going to do the right thing and he was going to practice and participate. But when it came to nut cutting time and it came to joint practices, preseason games, he's out. And I gave him too much credit. I think you're 100% right. It's a business decision. Ultimately, he's got to protect himself. I understand that. But at some point here between now and September 9th, you need to get this guy under contract because you're the only person in this market that said this. And I think it's a fascinating point that if he gets nicked up, I'm not jeopardizing my future. I'm going to slow my recovery here. Could be 1 week, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 to 4 weeks. He's going to play that game during the regular season. The Patriots know that, but they can't afford to play that game if they view themselves as a contender.
Especially with the schedule they have, right? Look at the receiving cores they're going up against this year. Like they're going to need that guy all year long. And this is a side note, but this is where I could see Vrabel in the future saying a lot less. Like you've talked about, and you're right, that he's got a lot more Belichick in him than people realize. He just, dresses it up and he's funnier. Yeah. But the old adage of like, we're only going to talk about guys that are here. We don't discuss contracts publicly. I think Robert Kraft saying they made him an offer to be the highest paid guy, that might be the last time you hear them say something like that for a while, because all that did was open up the can of worms of now, like you said, every time Vrabel talks, he's asked about it. Every time Wolf or anyone else talks, it's the first topic of conversation. It's been the biggest story on TV and radio, sports-wise in New England for a month now. So I think you're going
And
to
Wolf
see this
is
is going to be,
scheduled to, not to cut you off, Wolf is scheduled to meet with the media this week.
and
And
you
you
know what
damn well know he's going to be asked about it at least 3 times.
you know what the first question's gonna be, the fourth question, and the eighth question, right? Like, so that's where I think you're gonna see them go back to that a little bit more, where they don't really say much, they keep it internal. Because again, it just opens the can of worms. Now, it's interesting for you and I because we can talk about what they say and give our thoughts, but for them, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So, like, Kraft making that comment would have been one thing if they signed him within a week, but that comment was what, 3.5 weeks ago?
It
And
was
they
at the
still
start
haven't.
of camp. It was the first day of training camp.
Yeah, so a month ago, basically, a month ago, he made that comment. Witherspoon signed since then. He's still not si
And
so
at
again,
the
it's just
time, you probably thought the same thing I did, which is, well, if he's saying that they offered him that kind of a contract, then we're going to be hearing that they extended him here at some point in the next 2 or 3 days. Almost a month later, still nothing.
and you wonder if maybe that was a tongue-in-cheek frustration comment from Kraft, like, "Yeah, we offered him all this, and he still hasn't accepted it." You wonder because but at the time, you're right. Kraft said that he had been out there practicing, and not just practicing, going balls to the wall against A.J. Brown every day. And so again, I think this is gonna be the last like next year when they negotiate with
Right.
May and the year after when they negotiate with Campbell and Henderson, I don't think you're gonna see any comments like that because it
No,
just
no.
adds fuel to the fire. And again, as you've said, and you're right about this, Vrabel has a lot more Belichick in him than people realize, and I think this is gonna be one of those Belichick things that he follows in the future, maybe to our frustration at times, but I think it's gonna be one of those things he follows.
Yeah, and it makes sense. You can't
Yeah.
talk about it. And the reality is Kraft said that a month ago. That was still 3 weeks before Devin Witherspoon signed his extension in Seattle. So now we have a template. Now we know. But if you believe Tom Curran's report last week, and I do, that Gonzalez doesn't just want 1 or 2 million more so that he can set the market. He wants to ensure that a year from now he's still one of the 2 or 3 highest paid corners in the league. That's where I think there's a wrench in the plan, right? Because the Patriots very well could have offered him a contract that could have set the market. But my point is, if Gonzalez's people are saying, "Hey, listen, Witherspoon is making this per year. We want, and it's the same agent. We want to come in at 4 or 5 million more potentially a year over that." I don't see a deal getting done if that's the case, John. Not this offseason. It could potentially get done next offseason, but I'll take it a step further. And I don't want to be an alarmist here, and I'm not trying to be a hot take artist. But if this gets to next spring, who's to say that they don't trade him? Right?
Well,
If
and I
this
think
gets to a point where he wants 38, 40 million a year, they may say, you know what, let's just take the 2 1s and cut our losses.
you really don't wanna be in a position next spring when you're negotiating with Gonzalez and May at the same time,
No,
because
no, no, no.
May if May has another top 5 MVP season, he might ask for 70 million a year,
Yep.
and if Gonzalez next offseason is asking for close to 40, you really gonna pay 110 million to 2 players, even though they're great players at premium positions? I don't think so. And
No.
look, my theory, and I think Gonzalez is an elite player, and I would pay him. If you wanna be the highest paid guy in 2027, then why don't you just wait and negotiate in 2027? Like,
Right.
you're negotiating now, and if he signed a top of the market deal today, he'd still be one of the highest paid guys next year. Maybe not number 1, but he's still gonna be up there. There's not gonna be 5 more
Well,
quarterbacks that
especially
sign.
because who's next? That's how you got to look at this as well. Who's
Yeah.
the next guy that's going to get extended at the position? I don't think there's anybody like him. Probably for a couple of years, it could be Surtain if the Broncos decide to extend him again. But you're talking Surtain, Stingley. Those are the guys that are in his class. Those guys are already extended, so he'll probably be the highest paid corner in the league, potentially at least if he, let's say, does something now, at least this season and next. And then maybe
Yeah.
that changes in 2028.
Yeah, and like I said, you just don't wanna be in a position where you're negotiating with both of them in the same offseason because you'll end up losing one of them, which would be Gonzalez, or you're gonna be end up paying $110 million to 2 guys out of 53, which as great as they are, that's a tough way to build a team. So I think
And,
you want to
and
avoid
you
that.
saw with the Jets last year, right? You can still give him the 40 million a year now, but in a year from now, 2 years from now, you could end up pulling a Sauce Gardner with him and saying, we just can't do this anymore financially. Let's put him on the market and see what we can get. And at that point in 2028, if you get those 2 1s, then you ship them off and take your 2 1s and start over at the position. The thing is, it's a premium position, but it's a position, though, that if the scheme is sound and you have good talent at all 3 levels, you don't necessarily need an elite guy there per se. We've seen teams win without elite level guys, but it's also a position where it's nice to have an elite level guy. So we'll see. Final thoughts on this one. I think they're trying to kick me out of here. So final thoughts on this one.
Yeah,
That's
look,
why I kept
final
doing the
thought.
side eye.
Yeah, a barn burner of a, Saturday night preseason game,
Which, by the
24.
way, not to cut you off, do you know the amount of people that bitched about having to be here on a Saturday night? It's amazing. And listen, I'm not calling them out or anything. That's not what I'm doing here. But there were a lot of people that were unhappy about playing a Saturday night home game in the preseason because it's rare around here. They typically don't play Saturday night preseason games at home.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. They really don't usually do that, but they must have known how great this one would be, so they put it
Yeah.
on a Saturday night. I don't know. Look, it's just one of those where to me, the story of this week, honestly, was the joint practices.
Yeah.
I thought they were fantastic. Tonight was nice for the depth guys. I think it was good for development. Baron Morton, it was good for him, but this week was about those joint practices, and I thought they were great.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that the Patriots made a statement in those 2 joint practices,
Yeah.
Especially on offense. Drake May, I thought, looked fantastic. Look, I don't put much stock in the practice interceptions. I know he threw a couple on Thursday, but I thought all in all, he looked fantastic both days. A.J. Brown, I mean, if he stays healthy, that could end up being the best duo in the league, quarterback receiver duo in the league by season's end. So if not, they'll be a top 5 duo. But for me, the Patriots won the week in those 2 practices. Whatever happened tonight happened. It was more about coming out and proving you were the better team. Now, look, the Philadelphia Eagles are not who they were 2 years ago. I'm not sure they're a Super Bowl contender in the NFC. Are they a playoff contender? Sure. They're probably a playoff team, but I'm not sure I'd label them a Super Bowl contender. Nonetheless, and you made this point after Thursday, and I think it's so true, they flipped the script on him. The Patriots flipped the script. 2 years ago, Philadelphia came in here and dominated him en route to winning a Super Bowl. This year, I thought the Patriots were the better team, and by a substantial amount. It wasn't just they're the better team because Drake May threw the ball well and he threw it to A.J. Brown a bunch of times. I thought they were the better team in all 3 phases.
Yeah, and I thought what was cool is that they did it 2 days in a row, and I thought they were more dominant the first day than the second day, but to stand up and do it 2 days in a row, and I think, again, they're now peers with a team that won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, whereas 2 years ago, it was JV versus varsity in those joint practices, so that was, to me, my big takeaway from this week.
All right. Well, John, great stuff as always, my friend. Always great catching up with you and talking football. Let's do it again soon. Of course, the Patriots kick off the season on September 9th at Seattle, but we have one more preseason game on Thursday night, and if John and I can figure it out, we'll come back to you guys after that one on Thursday night. We'll talk some more football with you, but that'll do it for tonight's preseason game number 2. Patriots beat the Philadelphia Eagles in an epic comeback, truly one for the ages, one we'll remember for a long time around these parts. 24-21. Remember the name, Nick DeGennaro. He's a guy that will go down in Patriots history after tonight. For WEI's John Lyons, I'm John Sarianides. We will be back with you next time. Until then, have a great night. Peace.